Good day, Just Jane 1813 readers. Today, it's my pleasure to bring to you the launch of a new audiobook, Dangerous to Know, Jane Austen, Rakes and Rogues. And today I have a special visitor here with us today. His name is Refig, and his role has been as the narrator of this new story. So before we begin, I'd like to say hello to Andre and welcome him.
Thank you.
You're welcome. It's a real treat to have you here and to spend some time learning about the process of creating this audiobook. Can you, pardon me if I said your name incorrectly, can you say your whole name again just so our readers have it right?
Yep, it's Andre Refig.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And you say it with your lovely accent, which I could never imitate. So thank you. So before we begin this process, I was wondering if you could share with my readers a little bit about yourself and explain to us how you came to be the narrator of this collection.
Well, I'm an actor. I've been working as an actor for about 10 years now, mostly in theatre in the UK. About 5-6 years ago, I started to work as a voice artist as well. And very recently, so end of last year, I joined ACX. And I put samples of my work there. I previously recorded a couple of audiobooks. And Christina Boyd, who edits Dangerous to Know, contacted me and asked me to audition for the novel, for the anthology, and so I did, and she decided to choose me, which is great.
Wow. So I know that you have a pretty long history in acting, but it sounds like you're new to narration. So could you share with us what you loved about this process, and if this was your first time reading a JAF story, which is also known as Jane Austen fan fiction?
Yes, it was the first time I ever read Jane Austen fan fiction. I absolutely loved it. I had never, read that before. I'd read 3 Jane Austen novels, so I did know some of her work, and I've seen a few adaptations. So for me, it was very interesting to get a different view on the characters as written by the authors of this particular anthology. I found it very exciting as reading an audiobook as well. I mean, as I said, I'd done a couple before, but they'd both been, one had been non-fiction and the other had been poetry. So this was my first chance at voicing loads of different characters, and they were very interesting characters to voice. Yeah.
Well, that's great. So did you know that the Jane Austen fan fiction world existed before this experience, or did you not know that it existed?
I don't think I did know, no. I think when I found out it existed, I wasn't that surprised because, you know, I've always been a huge fan of her work, and I think it's understandable. But no, I didn't know it existed.
Okay, that's great. So there are so many wonderful aspects of this anthology, but of course, as in any Jane Austen-based story, I think what makes this really come alive are the characters. So I was wondering, you know, what were the challenges that you faced in having to perform so many different character voices? And what was it like for you to capture all of those different voices?
Well, I really enjoyed having to think of loads of different voices and having to create them. I initially started by obviously reading the short stories themselves. In the case of the characters who are from the novels that I did know, I obviously had that background and knew about them, so I was able to draw on that knowledge. In terms of the characters I didn't know, in terms of the stories, the novels that I didn't know, I read synopses that were that are available online. I read about the character descriptions, and I also watched clips of various different adaptations just to get a general idea of the character. Obviously not attempt to imitate any previous interpretation, but just to get a few clues, a few inspirations, as it were.
So that's great. It sounds like you put a lot of thought and research into this work, which I hope, you know, was really fun as well. Can you tell us, going through this process, if there was a character that you wound up relating to the most or found yourself connecting with more? Was it one of the rogues? Was it a supporting character? Was it an Austen hero that happened to play a more minor role in one of these stories?
Well, funny you should ask that, because actually it's the latter. I'm not a rogue myself, I'm sorry to say. So I didn't necessarily identify with any of those characters, although it's always a lot of fun reading those kind of characters. I think for me, the character I identify in Jane Austen in general with the most is probably Mr. Darcy. And in this particular anthology, he does appear in a couple of short stories as a supporting character. I think in terms of personality, I'm probably the most similar to him. But as I say, it was a lot of fun exploring the other side, as it were, with the cads and the rogues.
Well, I'm sure many people will be happy to hear that you relate with William Darcy, because he's still Jane Austen's most beloved hero. So that's great to know. And if someone was asking you about whether or not they should consider reading a book like this, they've read Jane Austen, maybe they've seen a couple of adaptations, but they really haven't read any Jane Austen fan fiction, what would you say to that person to either encourage him or her to put the book on their list, or maybe not? What do you think?
No, I would say definitely go for it. I think it's so interesting seeing the world explored, that Jane Austen's world is so vivid, but seeing it explored by other authors and seeing alternative viewpoints. So all the authors are very faithful to her style, faithful to the characterizations, but at the same time bring something very new. Some of the characters in these short stories, in the original novels, sometimes they're quite small characters, and even when they're the larger characters, they're not as drawn out as the protagonists. So it's really great to get to find out more about them, discover more about them, so I would say go for it, read them.
I would have to agree with you, because I do think that Christina Boyd in both of her anthologies really selected a group of authors that write Jane Austen fan fiction in a way that, yes, definitely honors and stays true to the essence of Austen's work. So I'm glad that you were able to notice that as well. Andre, I always ask the people that I interview why they think 200 years later we are all still so fascinated and talking about Jane Austen, her work, her life, her books, and all of the things that have become Austen-esque in the world. Why do you think we're so attached to staying true and staying involved with her?
Well, I do think she's one of the greatest authors to have ever lived. I think that she managed to capture the psychology of characters, especially the central protagonists, so truthfully and with such depth that was really unusual, I think, in those days. And I think influenced a lot of other authors. I think you see that a lot in contemporary fiction. For the time, it was almost unheard of. And I think that the issues that the characters deal with, in terms of their relationships, in terms of the culture and structure of society, they still very much apply today. Obviously, we live in a very different world, but I think all the fundamental issues and ideas that she deals with are still very relevant in this day. And I think that's why she's still so popular.
Sure, I think so too. And actually, it's one of the things that made her a little less popular when she was writing, because she had a naturalness to her work that wasn't being explored back then. So she was really a pioneer in that regard. And today it's so wonderful that we can really appreciate what she was doing in her writing. Before you go today, could you give my readers an idea of where else they could see your work? I know that you are in London, South London, and I was wondering, are there other places where we can enjoy your work?
Well, if you happen to live in the UK, I'll be
Which
touring.
many readers do.
Yeah, I'll be touring the south of the UK in a production called Oberon's Cure, which is a prequel to Midsummer Night's Dream, but by a contemporary writer.
Wow.
And that's touring at outdoor venues with the company called the Rude Mechanical Theatre Company. So you can look them up on Google and find all the details about performances.
So that is Shakespeare fan fiction?
I suppose in a way it is. Yes, it is. Yeah. So it's like, yeah, it is. Yeah.
See?
Yeah.
It's
And otherwise, you can listen to Dangerous to Know, which will be out hopefully very soon.
excellent. Well, thank you very much. I hope to hear you more in some Austen-esque works.
Yeah.
And good luck in the show. That sounds very interesting.
Great. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.